Hello again, future relatives and friends. It's Uncle Jeff on St. Patty's Day 2022, doing the last vlog on the psychic stuff. In the meantime, I've gotten an email from Sister Devon who reminded me that her husband Steve got that message about me trying to contact Barbara. Separately from Barbara and Bill being there, they were actually at an anniversary dinner by themselves, but of course they told Barbara about it. She also reminded me that when they visited the B&B in Phoenix that Randy did a dance in the light for them too, so she'd also experienced that. I went through my notes and I have a few other past lives I've gotten from all my three mediums that I haven't referred to, so I thought I'd just sort of run through them quickly here to finish that out. Kay and I were physicians together in Egypt back in the ancient days, so probably for Pharaoh's court because other people didn't get to use a doctor. In England in the 1100s, my soul twin Beatrice Fosack and I were did a life together in sort of a poor area of England, either as brother and sister or husband and wife. In the 1700s, Borneo, I was a shamanic student of an older teacher in the mountains of Borneo, and his name was Joak. I did a regression session with Frank Baranowski, a rather well-known regressionist who lived in Mesa. He has since passed on. And after a couple sessions, not much had happened. On the third session, I got a very clear past life with some details I still remember right now. I had been born in South Holland. My name was Jan van Rensselaer. I was born on August 28th, 1735. I remember it because the date is the same as my father's birthday in this life. I lived till 1780. I worked on the Dutch island of Bonaire, which is off the coast of South America, and I tended slaves that worked in the salt pans, raking and piling up the salt for export because salt was gold back in those days before refrigeration. And Frank asked me, well, do you have to beat them or mistreat them when they tried to escape? And I said, no, how can they escape? And he said, well, can't they just run away into the mountains? And I said, no, it's an island. They can't. And of course, he didn't know that Bonaire was an island. He thought it was somewhere in South America. So then he said, do you see your family? And I said, yes, my wife is named Layla. I have 3 daughters. And then he took me to the end of my life and said, what do you see? And I said, I'm Layla and the girls are standing around an open casket. And what's your body look like? And I said, well, I'm, sort of in my 40s, but I'm all covered in spots. And he said, what's your impression? And I said, well, hurry up and put the lid on before somebody gets it. So my impression after that was that it was an infective disease, probably smallpox, because that was pretty common back then. Another time, Kay Heatherly, the medium from California who used to visit Phoenix, did some family readings for me using photographs. And when she saw a picture of me holding little Randall when he was about a year old, she said, oh, he was your father in a former life. He was very stern, and he's come into this life willing to have softer imprinting, was the way she put it. And I thought that was interesting because when that picture was taken and he was about a year old, I remember I was holding him and he kept trying to put food into my mouth, which I thought was strange for a baby to do that, but he maybe recognized that I was the child and he was the daddy at that time. Then the last one I just found out about in recent times from a channeling done for me by an Indian guy who lives in Sikkim named Sam. And he said I was born in 1847. He didn't give very many details, but that I was named Uriel, a Spanish name, and I was a farmer, and that in that lifetime I was working on my heart and increasing my love for others and doing good deeds for others, which is kind of what I've tried to do in this life as a physician. And now donating my profits from my Airbnb to charities and local people that need help with loans. And so it was either Mexico, South America, or Spain. I think it was probably a Spanish-speaking country with a first name like Uriel. So now, just to give the rest of the history of what happened in my life, around 2008, Corky, Bill, and I decided to put the B&B on the market because we knew it took 2 or 3 years to sell a big property, and by that time, 10 years would have been enough for me. So we did that. In 2007, my old friend Dave Hammer called me that his partner, also named Randy, had died of tongue cancer. They had a business where they did commercial cleaning of businesses run by Asian entrepreneurs, which required a specific kind of business practice, and they were good at it. But Dave was the worker bee and Randy was the brains. So he was trying to keep going, but his body just couldn't do it, and he wasn't good at the contracts, and he had to let some of them go, and he didn't know how to negotiate them. And I said, well, you need to hire somebody to help you. So he finally found somebody named Jim, and he helped him. And then I said, you really need to sell that and just quit working. And he had, the mortgage on the house had been paid off by life insurance, and he had a small policy, but because he was on Medicaid, he had to spend the money on the house remodeling it. So he did. He remodeled the whole house and, spent a little on his stamp collection along with it. And so he, was able to sell the business to Jim, who got it for his sister and brother-in-law. Brother-in-law had a felony, so he couldn't get regular work, so it worked out fine for that. Dave got the house sold. Jim helped him move to Phoenix in the van with just his stamp collection and personal things, and he got to Phoenix and moved into our house that we owned across the street where Corky and Bill had lived for 2 or 3 years, and then Paletti had lived, but now she moved out to an apartment. So we had made trips down to Lake Chapala. For the prior 3 years, we went once a year in different seasons. We decided we wanted to move there. So in July of 2010, right after I'd finished working for the new owners, we closed at the beginning of 2010, and they had me work for them for 6 months. So we went down to Lake Chapala looking for a house to rent. We weren't thinking of buying, but we started looking around at houses to buy as well. And there was one I was interested in because it was only $129,000 originally, and it had dropped to $119,000 and then to $99,000. So I thought, okay, it's a small house, so maybe that's a better price. We came upon it. The owner was sitting in the carport with his buddies playing pinochle, and I said, well, I'm sort of interested in your house. He says, oh, come on in. He says, Norma, the housekeeper's working in there, but just go look around, see what you think. So we did that, and I chatted with Norma, who still works for me now. And he said, I'll tell you what, my bottom line is $80,000. I need to clear $80,000. And if you can pay me that and pay the real estate fee, we got a deal. And I looked at Dave, and I said, what do you think? And he said, oh, I like it. He said that you can build a second story on. It's already roughed in. And we saw that because it only had 2 bedrooms, and we wouldn't have a bedroom for guests that way, so we knew we could build on. So we negotiated the price, $80,000 or $83,000 with the real estate fee. We went to the agent who had just gotten the listing about 2 weeks before, never even shown it to anybody, and he acted as a double agent, wrote up the contract. It was one piece of paper printed on 2 sides, as opposed to a U.S. house contract where it's about 30 pages. We gave him power of attorney to do the closing for us, and we went back to Phoenix to get ready to move down. And about 5 weeks later, we left the first part of August with the Mini Cooper packed with just our clothes and our stamp collection and our pillows and a laptop. We arrived on August 7th, Dave's birthday, and we drove up in front, and I said, Dave, there's your birthday present. We laughed about it. We went through 18 months of construction until we got our second story built, so now we had 4 bedrooms with bathrooms each. So it really worked out well for us. Everything was going fine. I became a permanent resident of Mexico. Dave couldn't because he didn't have enough income being on Medicaid and only getting like $600 a month. In 2014, his mom died suddenly, cardiac problems. She was 90. And then less than 2 years later, in 2016, his dad died. And by this time, Dave was 65, and able to go off Medicaid and pay his own way. So we were doing the 6 months of deposits into his account from his dad's money to show that he could get a permanent residency. And he was already up to the 5th month when on March 7th, it was March 7th, he fell over on the lakefront while collecting bottle caps for donation. Kids can get a drop of chemotherapy for each bottle cap, and Dave did this every day with other people. He had a devastating brainstem stroke, was in the hospital for 19 days, came back to the nursing home, and died on my birthday 2 months later. People would say, "Oh, what a coincidence," and I said, "No, that's synchronicity. That's when two things cross that have been planned." I said, "I'm sure Dave and I planned this as a little joke between us to arrive in Mexico on his birthday, and he left Mexico on my birthday." But people say, "Oh, no, it's just a coincidence." I know better. So David, inherited his dad's money. Well, I was Dave's heir, so I inherited that money, and I knew this was going to fulfill the rest of my life's plan to buy Altea Cottage on Ceiba, because we had rented it a couple times, and I pretty much thought that would be a great place to live because it had extra property. And I came down here in 2018 in the fall and stayed for 6 months, and by March of 2019 I had bought the cottage. I went back to Mexico and then came back in the fall again in November. I had a manager who was renting out the whole house on B&B while I was gone, and then once I lived in it, I just rented out the one suite that was on the one side. In March of 2020, my cistern developed a leak and I was losing water, and I asked Cece, my manager, who fixes this? And she said, "Well, some local guys will do it for $600, but you need to get Jermaine. It's going to cost more, but he will guarantee it and he'll do it right." So I met Jermaine, my construction guy, for the first time. It was $3,900 to fix it, but he described all he was going to do. And then when he found the spot, he said there was a soft spot in the wall. It was an old cistern from 1858, just put together with packed dirt, stone, and lime. And that's how they built them back then. So they need repair from time to time. So he cemented the whole thing, found a few other little questionable spots, kind of like a dentist poking your teeth looking for a cavity. Put a new plaster layer on, cement washed it, and it was all done and good to go. And during this time I said, I'd kind of like to build a little house on the other part of this property for me to live in so I can rent the whole house out. And he said, "Boy," which is how they talk on Ceiba, he says, "you need to build a stone house." He said, you don't get no mold, you don't get no wood rot, you don't have to paint it, you don't get sun damage, and no hurricane gonna blow that house away. So I said, and since I knew he was the best stonemason on the island, I said, "Okay, well, how much does it cost?" And we worked out some basic prices, and then I realized that it was no more expensive than building a wooden house with the cost of wood. So we started doing it. And of course, most of you have gotten my construction videos, and so you know how that all rolled out. He was done a year later in May of 2021. However, the tile guy and the carpenter were holding me back, and they didn't finish their parts for another 6 months. So I didn't get to move in till December 18th of 2021. So I've been here since then doing my vlogs from here. So now I'm down to really the last psychic thing that happened, and this has to do with my old roommate Jim Cohen, who lived with me between Joe and Randy, and who heard my ranting and raving when Randy got that DUI in 1991 and called me up and said, "How are ya?" with his adapted New York accent. And Jim had started calling me on the phone in recent years. He'd had some health problems. He'd had a couple failed TURPs, which is the rotor-rooter prostate operation. He had to have a suprapubic catheter put in, it goes in through your abdomen. And this had to be changed every 3 weeks. It was painful, and he got infections. He had several bouts of sepsis, and He had back problems where he was bedbound. I mean, to the point where he had to actually, do his business on a blue pad. He couldn't even get to the toilet. So I was, I'd support him and help him out. And he loved to talk about medical things. He looked everything up on the internet and, was up to date on every antibiotic. So we would chat along. In the summer of 2021, he had been hospitalized so much that he literally didn't have enough money from his Social Security to even pay the co-payments each time he went in the hospital, and he was literally broke, and he asked for $100 loan. I said, no problem. I sent him the $100. And then he was so worried because each month he'd say, oh, I can't pay you back yet. I said, don't worry, Jim, just, whenever. And then the last contact I had was in August, and he usually called me, and when he hadn't called for a month, I called him. I left a message, no response. I sent him a text, no response. A couple of weeks later, I called again. The mailbox was full. A week or two later, I called again. The phone was disconnected, and I thought, oh, great. I started searching online for an obituary or, looking him up, and, I kept showing up at his address, but nothing else. So I thought, well, either he's, had a stroke or something where he's in a nursing home, or, he can't communicate and can't pay for his cell phone, or somebody's discontinued it. I don't, know how that happened, or he's died. And I looked online. I knew he had one relative, his older brother, Earl, and they'd been estranged for years, but, if your brother dies, you have to deal with it. I found his law practice in Minneapolis and sent him a message through their website. No response. I paid for one of these online search sites and to see if I could find anything more, and I found his ex-wife's email. He and a lesbian friend, Marianne, had gotten married years ago just for tax purposes. He was an accountant, knew how to do that, and they'd gotten divorced but remained friends. But Marianne's email address was either old, it didn't bounce back, but she didn't respond to me. So finally I thought, well, I guess probably Jim has died, because now, we're into February of 2022. About 3 weeks ago, I had another lucid dream, just like the other ones I've described, where I remember every detail. And it was early morning, just as I was waking up, and it was Jim. And he was happy and going, hi, Jeff. And then he held up a piece of paper that covered my whole visual field. And it was an old-fashioned style Minnesota death certificate. And I could see all the details. I'd signed many of them back in the 70s and 80s. And his name was listed with a typewriter, James D. Cohen. And as I moved down, I saw his address in Queens. I knew it, and I moved past it. And then I moved down to the bottom of the death certificate. There's 3 fields you have to fill in. Immediate cause of death due to a main cause, and then other diagnoses. And typically this is written in printed handwriting by the doctor, not typed. And written in the first line was, in nice cursive handwriting, sepsis. And in parentheses, very severe exclamation point, due to, second line, sepsis. And I don't think anything was in the third line. And that was the end of the dream. And I thought, well, I guess Jim's telling me he died of sepsis, which would be a normal thing for his problems. And then I thought, but he filled out that death certificate he showed me, because no doctor would write very severe exclamation point. So I had kind of a laugh at that. Only a couple days after that death certificate, I'm sitting right here at this very table planning a vlog. My front door is right here to my right, and my patio door is just over my shoulder, further to the right. I'm way on the back of the property. Nobody ever walks on the property except my construction guys. And if they knock on the door, they knock, and then they quick run and stand in the yard. They're very aware of your privacy. No Saban would ever come in here. They'd come up my driveway and holler inside or hello real loud to get me to come out, just because they respect your privacy a lot, because people live so close together here. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure go by the front door, and I thought, So I turned and looked to the patio door, and this 10 or 11-year-old boy walked by very slowly. He was dressed in a 60s or 70s baseball outfit, red cap, red sort of jersey top, and the pants with the high socks, you know, with the pants tucked in. And as he walked by, he turned his head and just went like that as he walked by, expressionless. And I thought, well, where's he going? He can't go to that side of my yard. It's totally enclosed. There's an upper part that you'll just come around and have to go all the way back this way. If you go down below, the same thing, but there's no exit there. So I got up and I went after him, and I was literally no more than 10 paces behind him. And when I got out there, he wasn't to be seen, so I went to the corner, nowhere. I looked down in the yard. I went to the other corner to see if he was leaving the property. No. I went down below by the pump room. There's only one little nook down there. I looked in there. There was no kid anywhere. He had vanished into thin air. So in my heart, I really believe that was Jim showing me an astral image of him being happy on the other side, because Jim never liked his body. He was always a chubby little short, you know, Jewish kid with kind of prominent Jewish features, and then he went bald when he was in high school, so he kind of had the Groucho Marx hairstyle, and of course he always wore toupee. And he's showing me this white Anglo-Saxon Protestant kid that I think he always wished he would have been, because he was showing me a popular sports-loving kid, which of course Jim wasn't. So that's the end of my psychic experiences to this point. I hope you've enjoyed them all, and it's the majority of them. I may have forgotten a few, but you know, 8 vlogs full is quite a lot. In the future, there may be something else once I come across something I find interesting for my future relatives. So adios for now.